And now, welcome to the Patriot Pulse podcast.
Good Wednesday morning, everybody. Glad to have you with us. It is Wednesday, April 15th, tax day. If you haven't got your taxes in, I hope you filed for an extension because today is the day we pay the piper, I guess. So good morning, Fred. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Paid my taxes.
Yeah. This is episode 255 of the Patriot Pulse podcast. And just as a reminder, we also simulcast to Two Guys Drinking Coffee and X and Rumble and Twitch and Kick and especially Bradford TV, which is part of the OBBM network. So we have this is our third Wednesday of the month. So as we have done for quite a while now, about a year, this is Econ Recon, and we bring back our old guest host or our host, Jim Machuga. And before we get started with bringing him in, let's do a little business with America here to help us keep this podcast on the air.
Need to get your brand noticed, remembered, and loved? At Everything Printed Promo, we turn your logo into walking, talking, shareable billboards. Whatever the occasion, we make you look amazing every time. Pens, shirts, drinkware, tech gadgets, you dream it, we print it perfectly. Visit everythingprintedpromo.com or call 888-619-9286 today. First-time customers get 15% off. Let's make your brand unforgettable.
Okay, as I said, this being the third Wednesday of the month, it's time for Recon, and we're going to bring Jim on here in a minute because once a month we take a look at the current state of the U.S. economy and even the global economy and what it means to the people of this country. Today we'll be talking about the economy from a macro perspective, the current gold and silver markets, the labor market, and out of control debt and what that means to inflation. So, as a matter of fact, we were about 30 seconds late or maybe even a minute late getting on because we got into a whole discussion before 9 o'clock. So let me bring Jim on. Jim, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, good people. How are you today?
We are blessed. I am blessed. I'm assuming Fred is too. I'm not going to speak for him, but
okay. Jim, let's start this off on a positive note because you mentioned it's tax day. And I was just reading that average refunds are up 11% over last year. So hopefully people are getting a little extra money into their pockets so they can go out and save it or spend it or do whatever they want to with it.
Yeah, that's good. I was pleasantly surprised this year. We typically, because we have our own business, we typically pay in. It's been very, very seldom that we've got anything back, but we were surprised this year. The tables have turned a little bit. So maybe it's because of the fact that there's an advantage to being old, because a lot of what happened was because of our age, in benefits to older Americans, I guess you could say.
I believe if you're 65 or older, you got a $6,000 additional tax deduction.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate that. Anyways, hey, let's get into talking about the economy as we were saying off camera here. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, and it's mixed messaging, and I say that because you can go anywhere on the internet, and you really have to discern what you find on the internet because depending on where you go, you can hear two different stories about the same topic. But let's start out with a macro look because they started talking the notes I saw, and you've mentioned this before, Jim, the GDP, the growth is going down, or I don't think it's gone negative, but it hasn't grown the way the government wants it to, but because they always adjust the numbers. Kind of explain that, because in other words, they give you one number today and then next month or 2 months from now they've adjusted it down. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, I mean, and we've talked about this for so many months at this point, and that's whether it be GDP numbers or employment numbers, whatever it is, they always report in big letters, the headline news that jobs increased this or GDP grew at this amount, and then you go through the first, second, and there's even a third revision, if not even a year-end revision, and those numbers are almost always going down. It's something like around 70% of the time, 80% of the time. The numbers get revised down. So whatever number you see in the headline this month, you need to look to see how they revised it down next month, 2 months down the road. Of course, nobody ever does. And then the next month you get the headline, the new headline. So
Yeah.
the numbers do tend to go down overall.
Yeah,
and then
and
of
that's
course, these are government statistics, and people wonder, does the government even fudge those numbers? Even the headline numbers, and
Yeah.
there's lots of debate over how inflation is calculated now. Very different than it was done in the early 90s and 1980s. And so if we calculate inflation today like we did back then, it would be much higher. But these are the numbers we have to work with, so this is what we run with.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, the one thing I did find was that the GDP, the growth of the GDP was down, for the Q4, fourth quarter of 2025 was downgraded to just 0.5%. And the government always wants to see projections in the 2 to 2.5%. So it was interesting that's quite a bit. That's quite a downgrade from, let's say 2% down to 0.5%.
Mm-hmm.
But
now, to be fair, if we're going by government statistics, in the third quarter, they did report growth of 4.4% last year. So do you average the two numbers together, 4.4, which seemed awfully high to a lot of people, 0.5 might have seemed low to some people, but if you take the two, that's 5%. That's 4.4 plus 0.5 is roughly 5 divided by 2. There you go.
2.5.
2.5% growth rate.
They play with the numbers. Well, let me ask you this. Do you think, and we still haven't got completely out of this, I don't think they've done thing completely with DHS, but do you think the government shutdown had anything to do with that?
Yeah, whenever there's different ways of looking at it. So GDP is government spending plus consumer spending. And then there's some other things that go into that as well. So it's basically consumption. You can add in savings and so forth. You have offsetting things. If the government shuts down, you're obviously not spending as much money. Mm-hmm. And since the government is roughly 25% of the economy, in terms of, I shouldn't say, roughly 25%, maybe 20%, something in that range. Government spending is roughly 8 billion. GDP is roughly 32. So it's about 25%. So if the government stops spending, you're obviously going to take a hit on the GDP.
Right.
So how much? I don't know. I'd have to look at those numbers to see exactly how much government spending stopped for that 6 weeks, and how does that compare to what it would have spent? I don't know.
Yeah, because they talk about when the government talks about a shutdown, they're saying there's a lot of ancillary spending that does stop, but essential services and the most infuriating thing that I see out of these things is that the government continues to get paid. I think when they have a shutdown,
they should not get paid.
Congressmen and the senators should stop being paid immediately, but there's still a lot of spending going on, even in a government shutdown, quote unquote, government shutdown. So, how much that really affects, I don't know, but 2000, maybe the people you're seeing or listening to say a little bit different, but just some quick internet searches, people seem to be a little bit optimistic about the beginning of 2026 as far as economic growth. Do your people see that, or is it exactly?
No, actually, the latest report, and I don't have it in front of me, but we talked about it at Discerning the Times, is consumer sentiment just hit a record all-time low this past reporting period, which just came out last week. Now, a lot of that has to probably deal with the Iran war. So sentiment at the beginning of the year may have been very different. But the most recent data as of last week is consumer sentiment is at an all-time low.
What you're talking about, whether they're optimistic about it and spending because they feel good about the economy. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. People don't feel good. And, it correlates. Well, I can't prove this. I think it correlates very strongly with whatever the price of gas is, because, we can talk a lot of numbers, GDP and all this stuff behind the scenes, but every time you drive down the road and you see a gas station and it says gas is $2 a barrel or it says gas is $5 a barrel, that changes your sentiment about the economy instantly.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. $4.19 a gallon was the highest I've seen in recent days, and it dropped down to about $4.10. But just like if you remember back, I can't remember how many years ago it was, but it was when the gas really jumped up over $3 a gallon, and it almost got up to $4, and then it went back. It seems like they push it up and they push it up, and then they bring it down a little bit and get you comfortable with a new high level. Okay. In other words, you never got back. Well, at least not around here. I know some places did, but you never got back down to under $2 a gallon.
The last big rise was underneath the Biden administration when we went to a war with Ukraine, or Ukraine-Russia war. That caused oil prices to spike big time. And, we talked about it on the show. Then things pulled back. And so now we got a new war and it's spiking again. This time, if you want to talk a little bit about global, we hear spikes in this country, but if you go overseas, especially to say Southeast Asia, that gets most of its oil from Iran or the Middle East, their prices have skyrocketed. So, beyond anything that we see here. For example, if you look on CNBC and you check the price of oil today, and keep in mind, these are the paper prices for oil to be delivered in May or in June. It's roughly around $90 to $100, spiked to about 110, 115, maybe 2 weeks ago, settled back down around 90 to 100 right now. But if you want to take possession of oil today, it's 130. If you're overseas, it's upwards of 150. In fact, there was one point where Qatar, I think it was Qatar, that was listing oil at $170 a barrel for delivery. So we are, to a large degree, even though we see the price at $4 or whatever it might be, we have been sheltered from what other parts of the world are experiencing. Literally within a week, I remember one of my pastors talking about the missionary over in Thailand. They had automatically started going into lockdowns, like 4-day work weeks, universities closing, going to online, services being cut because they were instantly going into that mode. And we see that gradually expanding out different countries in Southeast Asia. So just as a reference for your audience, like we might be complaining about $4 a barrel or $4 gasoline. Other parts of the country are getting hit very strongly, or other parts of the world getting hit very strongly. And Jim, I saw that post you did on Ireland, I believe it was, where there was a huge protest about inflation and economy and government in general. But what one of the factors that really spurred that on, of course, you've got a crisis going on, and that always motivates people to do something, to protest a little bit more. So we just need to keep that in perspective, that we're largely insulated from this.
Yeah, well, that, and we do. Go ahead, Fred. What were you saying?
The plan is to try to make. I think he's trying to make it so that people have to come get oil from us. I think that's part of the plan. I'm not saying that's 100% accurate. I'm just saying I think that is the strat. Okay,
so that's a great question, Fred, because that's been out there in the on the web a lot lately in the last week or so. And I remember when I first saw that image, and maybe you have as well, of a lot of tankers coming around South Africa, up the Atlantic into the Caribbean area. And so doing some research on that, and we talked briefly about this right before the show got started. Is that true? A little bit more time will probably tell whether it is or isn't, because I haven't seen an image of those ships prior to last week. So I have no idea what that's supposed to look like. Is it always looking like that, or is there really truly an increase in ships coming over? We don't know. I haven't had time to do the research. So let's say that is the plan. So the United States produces roughly 23 million barrels of oil a day, consumes about 21 million barrels of oil a day. There looks to be about 1 to 2 million barrels a day of surplus that we can export. If each of those tankers holds 1 to 2 million barrels, the super tankers hold 2 million. We could, without cutting into our own personal use, supply one of those vessels per day.
Per day, yeah.
Per day. So how much is that 2 million difference going to make? So this, the Middle East, that Strait of Hormuz handled about 20 million barrels a day. There's a pipeline in Saudi Arabia that's currently handling 7 million, sending it to the Red Sea. There's some other oil flowing out in other ways. Some oil, the Strait never really was completely shut down. If you played in cryptocurrencies or Chinese yuan, Iran was shipping the oil. You just had to use their terms, which is a whole petrodollar discussion. So we're still at a net deficit of 10 million barrels a day.
Let me ask you this.
Can we make up the difference? I don't know. We can do 2 million. That's 20% of the deficit. But then you got to ask yourself this question. We're tapping into the strategic oil reserves of the United States to the tune of 175 million barrels overall. So if we sell them a lot of oil, is it coming from our strategic reserves? And if so, is that a wise thing to do? Because those reserves are typically around 700 million barrels. Biden dropped it down to 400, and now Trump wants to drop it down to roughly 200. Is this a good move? I don't know.
Yeah, but we're still tapping into the what if scenarios. We don't know exactly what's going to happen.
Well, no, that's stated policy, Fred.
Right.
That's a stated policy from Trump that we're going to pull 175 million barrels out of the strategic reserves.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure.
No, I'm talking about as far as those ships coming here is a what if scenario. We haven't actually seen those ships, so we don't know exactly what's going to happen with any of those ships.
Yeah, but that's just something for people who say this is a great thing. Think it through a step farther and decide for yourself if it really is. It sounds good on paper. We're going to sell them all this oil. Now, granted, if the price of gasoline goes up to $4 and $5 a gallon, we're not going to consume as much. Does our consumption drop 1 or 2 million barrels a day? Then we got 1 or 2 more million barrels to ship overseas every day. So we could service 2 or 3 or 4 tankers, maybe. I don't know. It's an interesting theory.
The question I had on that whole, tapping into the strategic oil reserves was if we have a 2 million barrel a day surplus, between what we can produce and what we consume, why are we even tapping into? Have you heard any logical reasons why they are doing that?
Well, one of the things is we have to keep in mind this is a global market.
Yeah.
And we talked about it there's a thing known as arbitrage. And let's say, for example, you own the oil on that tanker and it's setting sail for, some country, country X, and they're going to pay you $100 a barrel for it. Okay. Now country Y calls you up and says, look, I'm going to give you $150 a barrel for that oil. I mean, if you own that oil, where are you going to send it? You're going to send it to the country that's giving 150. It's called arbitrage. Why are you going to take $100 when you can get 150? Now, of course, you have to account for maybe additional cost to ship it over there or whatever that might be. But if you're getting a 50% premium or a 20% premium, it may very well be worthwhile to do it. So on a global basis, the prices are supposed to balance out. There's always going to be a little difference from country to country, but for the most part, they should remain the same because it's a global economy.
But how does that affect us tapping into our strategic oil reserve? Are we saying we're doing that to try to sell it to a higher bidder?
That's actually a great question, Jim. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but maybe it's a great way to make some money. Yeah.
Hey, before we get going any further, I just want to give a shout out to those joining us today. We got Kelly on here from Warren. Tom is on here. Cindy's on. Tom Eddy, our friend from down in Penfield. and Brian is on with us today. So welcome everybody. Glad you're on with us. And just as a reminder, anybody that jumped in late, with this is Econ Recon with Jim M today. So let you had briefly mentioned, Jim, just the dirty word inflation. Okay, so I've got to. We didn't get a chance to talk about this off camera, but all right. So there's two schools of thought for inflation. One, prices just keep going up for whatever reason, manufacturing costs, so on and so forth. The other one is, and is the value of the money keeps going down and down and down, which we know is happening too. So you had mentioned before we got on that we should talk about inflation. So with that in mind, are we talking inflation because our money is tanking more, or because of the Iranian thing? What's your take on why we should be even more so concerned about inflation right now?
Okay, so and that's a great question. So we use the term inflation incorrectly. For anybody that listens like to John Birch Society or Raw, for example, outspoken person on this stuff. The man's like 90 years old. I mean, he should get some kind of a medal.
What was his name?
Definition of inflation. Ron Paul?
Oh, Ron Paul. Okay. You kind of cut out there for a second.
Okay. So the true definition of inflation is an increase in the money supply. It's not what the average American or the average person probably in the world refers to it as. We think of, a basket of groceries went from $10 to $20, something like that. But inflation by definition is an increase in the money supply. So if we keep borrowing money, printing money, we create inflation by definition. Now, to the average American, that means nothing, but it shows up with the price of product, at the store going up. But is that real? Because as our good friend Greg Manarino would say, every time you print a dollar, you say you had $10 out there and you printed one more dollar. So now you have $11. You have stolen some value from the other $10. Okay, so the value is still the same, but you take every time you print more money, the other money that's already there is losing some value. So it's not worthless overall, but it is worth less. Okay, and so the question of inflation, prices going up, is it the price of something gone up? It could be just from, say, for example, with the oil. You got less oil, the price of the remaining oil becomes more valuable, or the oil becomes more valuable, so people are willing to pay more for it. If you have a lot of something, it's not worth much. If you don't have much of something, it's worth a lot.
Sure.
But then there's monetary inflation, the real definition of inflation, where you're printing more money and prices are going up because the money's worth less. Me. And folks that follow the Constitution know that we're supposed to go on a gold and silver standard. I've said this so many times, it's like, banging my head against the wall. It's constitutional, it's biblical, It's ethical, it's historical. I don't know how else to phrase it. And it's not my phrasing, it's what, the Bible says, it's what the Constitution says.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about inflation, let's take, for example, I use it again, but we'll use it today, Jim, because it's even more relevant today than it was in previous examples. In 1964, a gallon of gasoline cost roughly, we'll say 30 cents a gallon. 1964 US dimes. Today, James, we'll say, for simplicity, we'll say a gallon of gasoline is $5. Okay. We'll say it's 5. We'll make it numbers even. So we know in right now in Bradford, it's 4.12. So it's really closer to 4. But we'll even say 5. Right now, a silver dime, because it's 90% silver, or I should say a 1964 dime, because it's 90% silver, is worth $5.75. Okay, $5.75 times 3, if I'm doing some math here, is roughly $17. okay, for those same three 1964 dimes. So in 1964, those 364 dimes could buy you 1 gallon of gasoline. Today, they can buy you over 3. The price of gas did not go up. The value of your currency that you're using has gone down. In fact, gas is 3 times cheaper today than it was in 1964 if we use biblical constitutional money.
Right.
Does that make sense?
But
Yeah. Have you done is that a current calculation? I mean,
Yeah,
I've done the math on that before. I've actually weighed 3 dimes on my postage scale and multiply that by 0.9, which gives me the silver amount, and multiplied it by the amount of the price of the silver.
James, there's an easier way. You can go to coinflation.com. I just did right now. And what I just quoted you is the coin value calculations use of 4:56 p.m. April 14th, 2026. So it's 12 hours old.
So you're saying 1 dime is worth
$5.75, $5.75 and 3/8 after that.
So and that's the silver content value.
Yes,
$5 in that dime. Okay.
Yep. So if you went to a coin shop or something like that, it's $5.75.
So should we, when we pull up to the pump and we see $4.12 a gallon, should we be angry at the price of oil, or should we be angry at the government for putting us on the Federal Reserve in 1913 and printing all this monopoly money for over 100 years?
Well, you got option A and option B there, angry at the gas pump or angry at the government. Maybe option C at this point, James. Maybe we should be angry at ourselves for allowing this to happen, because Ron Paul and others have been talking about this stuff for 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 years. And we Americans have done nothing to stop it, or at least done nothing successfully to stop it. And so we need a new battle plan.
And so these people sitting in
go ahead,
Congress
Fred. Sounds like you want to say
none
something.
of these people who've been sitting in Congress for 30 and 40 years, they've done nothing to stop it either. But they complain the most. But they've been sitting there the longest doing nothing. And they think that their advice is better, but they're not. They're the cancer.
Fred, this is part of it. Regardless of what Congress has done, we all have had an option to do things.
Yeah, we voted these idiots in.
That if people are upset with grocery prices, maybe start a garden. If you're upset with your dollars in your pocket losing value, then maybe you should be investing in gold and silver.
I do.
If you did that, then you're pretty happy right now. That's all I can say.
I'm just saying that these people sit and they blast their mouths all the time, but they're the cancer that's causing the problem in the U.S. Yes, Americans voted them in. I agree with you 100%. But the bigger problem is the fact that these idiots are sitting there and we keep voting these idiots in.
Well, I'm talking more, Fred. There's that whole aspect. But what are we as individuals doing in our own personal lives that we can control? For example,
what I'm trying to say is our economy didn't get destroyed in 4 years. It got destroyed in a long term of just currently getting worse.
Oh, yeah. I just referenced back to 1964, right. 1965.
Yeah.
But we as Americans have always had the power to try to navigate the system. We can try to vote them out and do that sort of thing, but we can do things in our own personal lives. Don't go into debt. Don't buy a big truck at $75,000 when a car at $30,000 might suit you just fine. You don't need to have a $500,000 house, maybe something a little bit smaller. Instead of eating out every night, what about saving money and buying gold and silver for investments, or some other investment for that matter, whatever you feel is right for you. We have always had the power to do the right thing. Okay. If people are finding themselves in a real big mess right now, and they're older, if you're 25 years old, this isn't your problem. You inherited this problem because my generation, your generation, we created it. But we who are older, we have had the power to do the right thing. You know, if people now say, for example, silver, well, it's $80, that's too expensive. Well, you know what, Jim, we were encouraging people to buy silver when it was $12 a few years ago.
Yeah.
You know?
You know, one of the things, the comment I wanted to make, because the things that you're talking about that we can do personally are all good suggestions. They're all good ideas. But really what they do is they affect what I'm going to call our personal economy. Okay.
Mhm.
In my household, I have a personal economy. Okay. I can do things to affect my personal economy.
Right.
Meaning, just like you're saying, planting a garden, reducing my food bill, not driving as much, not consuming as much gasoline. The long story short, I can affect my personal economy, but we've got a macro economy that is being manipulated by some very evil people. And I won't go down the road of, you know, how we could do a whole podcast on that part of it. But
True.
the point is, what we do individually is not going to impact the macro, which is really the elephant that needs slain and put under control.
And that's
I
why
might,
primary
I might
elections
disagree
are
with
important.
that, Jim.
Why is that?
That's why
I
the
might
primary
disagree.
elections are important. Why do you think they want people to live in subdivisions so that you can have your own garden? Why do you think they want people to be in neighborhoods that are controlled by these stupid HOA rules and stuff like that so that you can't have animals to grow and feed yourself? This is all part of a strategy to get people controlled.
Okay. So we need to break the control. So I guess I'm a little bit more hopeful than you are, Jim, because I think we do have an option, or an option that hasn't been tried. Will it work? I don't know. It's only a theory. But I know that what we've been doing for 75 years or more isn't working. And the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. I am very much a John Bircher. You help get me involved in that. I'm very much a constitutionalist. We have got to pound the Constitution left and right, never stop, day and night. And I would say one of the biggest things is, and I'm a political atheist. I don't care for Democrats or Republicans. I think they're both part of the problem. Vote third party. I don't care who you vote for. Get a third party candidate. Vote yourself in. Do something. But if you're voting for I would never vote for. Well, I can't say that. I mean, I never say never, because you don't know who the individual might be. You know, you don't want to just stereotype people. There's good people on both sides, but the vast majority, I think, are not so good. So, you know, I'm not a fan of either the Democrats or the Republicans at this point.
Well, you're an independent, so you can't even make a decision.
Constitutional libertarian. What's that?
I said you're an independent, so you don't even get a vote in any of that on who's going to run for the election. So your vote doesn't even help. My bottom line is this: the local power people is who we need to start paying attention to. Not so much who's sitting in the presidential seat or who are controlling our school boards, our Supreme Court of our states that we live in. That's where the true power is, and that's what's controlling people.
But you know what, Fred? When I voted last November, I voted for about 5 or 6 constitutional party candidates right here in the state of Pennsylvania. There were options.
Yeah,
and I voted for every one of those constitutional candidates.
What's their names?
Offhand, I couldn't tell you at this point, Fred. It's been 6 months.
We go. We got to get people informed in order for people to know.
I don't remember their names, Fred. Sorry.
Yeah, we're kind of getting.
I'm sorry. I'll get off. I'm off topic. I'm off topic.
Yeah, we're getting off the economic topic. You know,
I offered you a solution, an option. If you like it, take it. If you don't like it, don't take it.
No,
my solution is what Jesus said: "Giving the man what is man, giving to God what is God's." That's what he said. Whose face is on this coin? That's what Jesus said.
Now that's a whole other topic now, but anyhow.
No, but that's where I'm at.
Well,
so
yeah,
go on.
There's a whole issue, and I think everybody is, you know, except the diehard purists that are saying, okay, I'm red all the way, and you're never going to get me off that bandwagon, or I'm blue all the way, and I'll never come to the center. You know, most people that are somewhere in the middle are being disillusioned by this whole thing, and part of it is the economy, in other words. But the solution isn't as easy as just voting third party, because until such time that a third party could be a viable option, it's not going to make a difference, and it's only going to make the person voting that way feel better about their vote, but it's not going to impact what's happening. And it's bigger than any one of us can come up with a solution. I mean, think of it. I'd love to be able to clean house. Just wipe the Congress out, just fire everybody and start from scratch. But and there again, what you'll end up doing is bringing more criminals in.
We could do it so easy, but our biggest problem is we're even divided even in our belief. That's why Muslims are taking over, because the church has got so many subdivisions that they can't agree on anything.
Okay. So
go ahead,
so you offered
Jim.
you asked my opinion on the economic solution. I gave it. If we want to go down politics, that's another topic. Do we wish to stay on economics?
No, let's go. As a matter of fact, you brought up gold and silver. Yes. And the 1964 dime. We saw gold and silver spiking, especially silver. I don't watch gold as much because I can't afford it. But we saw silver spiking. It was going over $100 an ounce. And now it's sitting around $80 an ounce, give or take a few bucks or a few cents. So what, Jim, and I want your opinion because you follow this much more closely than I do. And you've often talked about markets being manipulated by the big banks and so on and so forth. Who's buying what? The prices being artificially manipulated to keep the price down so the big boys can buy more, et cetera, et cetera. Is this what's causing this drop to $80 when it was up to 100? I mean, that's a 20% drop in the last month or two.
Well, it all depends on how you're looking at things, James. So we have two markets out there. We've oftentimes talked about, you have the paper market and then you have the physical market. Right. The two are not necessarily the same. Okay. Right. So if we take a look at the paper market, let's talk about that one first. Okay. I'm just pointing up some data. Okay. Just so I can get some accurate numbers. Okay. So the paper market 2 years ago was roughly $20, $23. At one point, I think in 2023, it dropped about $18. But in 2024, we'll say $23. It's now $80. So that's roughly, it's a fourfold increase, roughly speaking. Okay. A nice increase, 400%, roughly. So it did go all the way up to 120. And many people said, we're into a little bit of a blow off top, as they call it. Whatever goes up vertically tends to come back down vertically a bit, but it went vertical from about 30 to about 100 to 100 officially, but at one point it was even up to about 115, and then it pulled back to 95 or 90, maybe about 85. Then it went back up to 95. Then it pulled back down to about 70, and right now it's sitting around 80. That's the paper price. Okay, that's for silver delivery in June or July, something like that. Okay. Still a very, very nice increase. And one could say gold and silver, and gold has gone from about 1,800 to about 4,800. A nice increase as well. Not as much for sure, but still very nice return on your investment. And it went to about 5,600 and it's pulled back to about 48 right now. Still a nice increase. So gold and silver in the last 2 years has performed fabulously well. It did pull back from its highs of say $100 or $100 and 5,600. In the paper markets, James, if you go to JM Bullion at this very moment, because I just pulled it up, a 2026 American Silver Eagle is $96.
Right.
So there's a divergence between the paper markets and the physical market.
Well, that's the same as this.
Manipulated, folks, plain and simple.
Well, that's the same though. You've taught me all this stuff, Jim. In other words, there's a premium and there's a spot price. So they're talking about a spot price of 80, but the premium price that JM Bullion is going to sell me that dollar coin for is $96.
Right,
All
because
right.
that's the real value of it, James. The paper price is manipulated. It's a lie.
Well, no, but they have to get a premium. I mean, we're not
No,
buying the
okay,
silver for what
so
the spot price is.
if you went back to normal times, if the paper price was $17, you could buy a Silver Eagle for 19. There was a $2 markup. That was it. That held true for the
Okay.
longest time.
All
Okay.
right, maybe.
And during COVID, you saw a great divergence. You saw the paper price drop to 11, but the physical price go to 28 because the markets were manipulated. Or let's just put it this way. If there's chaos going on, sometimes people have to sell assets to cover their margins because people buy these things on debt. And so if there's a big price move, sometimes they got to unload things because they now have to make what's known as a margin call, which, by the way, there's a good movie called Margin Call.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Okay. So the paper price, and we've said this, in normal times, there should be a $2 difference, maybe a $3 or something like that. If it's a really unique, one of a kind type of item, obviously they're going to charge a little bit more because they're not making very many of them. But the Silver Eagle, they make millions and millions of these things. Okay. So they got mass production economies of scale. So there is roughly an $18 or $16, $17 difference between the paper and the physical price. Even on a generic silver round, it's probably close to 90. So there's a $10 premium difference there where there should only be a $1 difference. Okay.
Well,
so
all right.
basically what the physical people are saying, we know the paper markets are manipulated. We're not playing that game. This is what we're selling it for.
Okay, I've got to ask something here for clarification then,
Yeah.
because you keep saying paper market, and this may not be understood by everyone, but in other words, there is, and you know the terms for this, but basically I'm a firm and I say I'm sitting on 100,000 ounces of silver and I'm selling it to you, but I'm keeping it in my vault. So I'm saying you buy my silver and I'll hold it for you. Well, let's say I've got that 100,000 ounces of silver. I might sell 500,000 ounces. So there's 400,000 ounces I don't have.
Yep.
But as long as people don't come and ask me for it, I can play that Ponzi scheme all day long.
Yep. Sure can.
So is that what you're talking about? The paper?
And Jim, it's even worse than that. So when we talk about buying on margin, I'll just throw out a number here because it does change. I don't know what the current number is. A contract of silver on the COMEX exchange is 5,000 ounces. So one contract equals 5,000 ounces. You can control those 5,000 ounces with like about 10% down. Okay. So, at some points you could control an entire contract for like $15,000, $25,000, even though it would cost you $250,000 or something like that to actually own it. So not only could I, in theory, sell you a contract of silver of 5,000 ounces and not actually, and if I own it, I only have to actually own 10% of that value. But I can actually sell you contracts of silver that I don't even own, period, called naked shorting. It's a complete crime. Now, these things were introduced in the 1980s. They were called derivatives. And actually, they were introduced 100 plus years ago, too, and probably even before that. These derivative things were outlawed with the crash of 1929. Some people might remember that in the history books because they caused the stock market to crash because everybody bought stocks on margin. They borrowed a little bit of money, and then when the stock started falling, they had to come up with the rest of the money, and they didn't have it, so it became a disaster. Mm-hmm. That was all made illegal because people saw how horrible it was. Well, at some point in more recent years, we made it all legal again, and during the 1980s was a big time that we did that. It's a complete crime. It's a complete sham. And, but it is what it is.
Well, it's a Ponzi scheme is what it is. Yep,
exactly.
And
so is the national debt. So is Social Security and everything else.
Yeah.
In a bigger topic here, maybe just a slight side note. We went from being a producer, a manufacturer of things to a service economy, but we also did something else. we financialized everything. In the old days, the banks were there to support the economy. So if you were a small business owner and you had a bright idea, you went to the bank to get a loan to start your business, for example. Banks were only there to support the real economy. With all these derivatives and all these shenanigans, we have flipped that around to where the real economy is there to support the banking industry, which is very scary.
Yeah.
Because the Eastern countries like China and them, when you go to the Shanghai Gold Exchange, it's a physical market. That's what it is. You come in there, that's the physical price. You buy and sell what you actually have. Now, I'm sure somehow they're working in other shenanigans someplace. JP Morgan isn't going to pass up an opportunity to do something like that. But for the most part, a lot of the rest of the world is going to a very real physical market. And we're in financialization mode. We've chosen two very different courses.
Well, and again, I don't want to get political on this because it's not our topic. Our topic is money and the economy. But because the economies of the world are tied together and there are just a few very large banks that are controlling everything, then it'd be hard to separate what's happening here from what's happening in Europe or happening in Asia or happening in South America. They're all being controlled by the same mega banks, and they're global banks. They're not CNB Bank down the street here.
Well, yes and no, but one could say they operate with different purposes in different countries. So we learned during the Ukraine war, when that first started up, Putin was very clear. He goes, we're moving towards an asset-backed currency trade system. And what he meant, it can be oil, it can be gold, it could be land, it could be food, it's going to be commodity-based. We talked about that quite a few times. The United States continue to stay in more of a financialization mode. China, the BRIC nations, we talked about the BRIC nations. They continue to put in place a more commodity-oriented economic system where if you want our oil, then give us something real in exchange. Now, of course, they're still using currencies, but we also know that a lot of countries have been stockpiling gold and silver, and since as of last year, gold is now revalued as a tier 1 asset in the global banking system. So we continue to move towards a commodity-based new world order. And if you're stuck in the financial world, the financialization aspect of things where it's all paper stuff, you might find yourself on the wrong end of the trade.
Interesting that you brought in the term new world order in there. Because what if we went back to a gold-backed dollar or a gold-backed currency, gold and silver? How we used to have silver certificates that said, if I'm holding this, which I have, a couple, if I'm holding this $5 silver certificate, once upon a time, I could go into a bank and say I wanted $5 worth of silver for this. That's a commodities-based economy rather than a paper fiat currency-based economy. So can we separate the idea of going back to a commodity-based economy in this country and divorce ourselves from the idea of a new world order?
Well, okay, so that brings up a very good point. So you have a couple of thoughts going through here. We should go back to the Constitution. If we're in the United States, we should demand that the Constitution be followed. And that would be gold and silver currency. Or actually, the Constitution just says gold and silver coins. It doesn't even say currency. It says gold and silver coins.
Yep.
So we should all be walking around with 1965 dimes and 1964 dimes or silver coins, whatever it is, or gold coins. Now, to make that easier, they did come up with the silver certificate that a $2 silver certificate would be worth X amount of money. You could go into a bank and exchange that certificate for an ounce of silver or whatever the value equivalent value was. We should go back to that. That would be the right thing to do. That would be biblical, constitutional, ever and anything else. but are we going to do that? I think yes and no is the answer. I believe that we are going to go back to a commodity-based currency system of some sort. At least the majority of the world is going to do that. Okay. Is the United States going to do that? I'm not sure. It depends if we actually have the gold in Fort Knox. Okay. But beyond that, the trick I think is going to happen is this, and this is what we cannot do. And the question is, do you think we're moving in this direction or not? You asked that in the pre-market thing that we can only base it on facts that we know. So is there any signs that the US government is going to move us back to a gold and silver coin?
No.
I don't see any.
No.
In fact, what I do see is that we're going to go to a digital coin. And I will reference, and we've talked about this, the Genius Act and numerous executive orders, all of which talk about cryptocurrencies, tokenization of everything, and everything else that we read from the banking industry. That is where they want us to go. Central bank digital currencies or some form thereof, even if not underneath that name, some form thereof. That would appear to be where we are heading. Now, will they or could they back that by gold and silver? Maybe they could. Should we still go down that digital route? Absolutely not.
No. That and I'll tell you what, because you were talking about we have control locally over what we do. I think, this is my own personal opinion, is that this is where we do have the power to just say no. In the idea of, you can, the government can tell us, all right, we're going to come out with this stable coin or this Bitcoin or this digital currency or whatever you want to call it. And as long as they make it optional, we always have the choice to say, no, we're not going to go there. But even if they tried to make it mandatory and said, okay, we're going to do away with all currency, we're going to do away with all methods of trade other than digital currency, we still have in unfortunately it's called the black market. We still have the option to say, no, we're not going to do this. And if everybody in the country, or the vast majority of us, stepped up and said no to a digital form of currency, we're not playing this game,
right,
then I think we could stop it. I still believe we can stop the whole idea of the CBDC and the programmable money and changing everything.
Well, and now we go down, can we? There's always a possibility. Will it happen? If I was a betting person, I would probably say, no, it's not going to. And this would be my theory as to why. Because we've already gone so far down the road of credit cards, electronic transfer of funds. How much, if one said, if say, for example, a family spent $10,000 a year, or let's make it simple, $100 a year. How much money how much of that $100 was actually used with paper currency in their hands? And how much was used on a credit card? How much was used by ACH bank transfers or wire transfers or something like that? I would be interested to know what that number is. Maybe we could Google it. I don't know. So we've already largely gone down this road. Now, we know that there was a huge uproar against central bank digital currency. So in the Genius Act, it talks about private businesses like Walmart introducing stable coins. I suspect they believe there would be significant backlash to a central bank digital currency or a government issued central bank digital currency per se. So I think what they're going to do is actually, I don't think this is what the Genius Act says. This is policy that was signed by Democrats, Republicans, and by the president, that they're going to let individual businesses to issue their own money. And so Walmart will start issuing stable coins. And it's not that crazy. They already issued gift cards, that sort of thing. So, and then they're going to get people to, they'll give you an incentive. Remember, take the jab, get a free Krispy Kreme donut or something. They're going to start doing that sort of thing to get you to, use your US dollars that you might have and pull it into this new system. It's kind of like now they're phasing out pennies. Well, yeah, basically when pennies show up at the banks just hold those pennies. And then it'll be nickels and dimes and quarters. And, gradually it won't happen overnight. Does it take a few years or whatever? I don't know. Do they get the system in place and then you have a really good crisis and they implement it very quickly out of necessity, just like during COVID? There was a coin shortage. You couldn't have coins. Why was there a coin shortage? I think it was a test to see how people would respond to giving up their coins.
Well, all right, we're coming up on the top of the hour, and as a matter of fact, what I'm going to do, because we're going to have Bradford TV, our podcast on Bradford TV, drop off right at 10 o'clock. So we'll kind of say goodbye to anybody watching us live on Bradford TV as we wrap this up, because I know we're going to go over the 10 o'clock mark by a little bit.
And I set some time aside so I can stick around if you want.
Yeah. But it's what you're talking about there, Jim, and I don't argue your theory as far as going down that road already, but it's always optional at this point. In other words, yes, I make a choice to, well, actually, I'll tell you what, in the government, there is no choice. If you have a refund coming from the government, they don't issue checks anymore, as I just found out yesterday. It has to be a direct deposit.
We talked about that last year with that executive order, Jim. Yeah. Although I did pay my quarterly taxes in the fourth quarter last year with a check, and they did accept it. Okay. They were not supposed
and we do. We were paying our estimated taxes with a check as well. Okay. But
did they accept it?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. Yeah, they still are accepting those things.
Yeah. So, but the point I was trying to make is it's still optional in most other situations. In other words, with my business, I have some trading partners that I deal with that we have I'm involved with a monthly contract with them, and I can elect to pay them in advance, let's say a month at a time, or go with like as you say, an EFT transaction where they automatically debit my account.
Right.
Okay. That's still my option.
True.
All right. And as long as we continue to have that option, then I think we can avoid, and that's the one thing I think we, the people, still have the power to do, is say no, because I still have the option to say no, stop that automatic transaction and go back, even if it's going to the bank and getting a cashier's check or getting a money order and sending it that way. It's a lot more convenient or inconvenient, but I still have that option.
Yeah, you have two thoughts here, James. One, we still have the option, but our options are becoming less and less. Okay, if you go to a hotel, they want a credit card. There's no more cash. Okay, so the options are slowly, it's like going down a path that gradually gets narrower and narrower with less options to get off the path. Okay, the path, we're going down this path, it's getting narrower, and we don't see as many off ramps anymore. There's less. There used to be 50 off ramps, then there was 40, and then 30, and we're getting to fewer and fewer. The other thing is, we are thinking like 50s, 60s, and 70-year-olds. The younger generation is perfectly happy not using cash at all.
Because they can't spell.
What's that?
They can't spell.
Okay.
Because they can't spell. Our school system's dumbing them down.
Okay. Well, that's another topic. I'm
just being honest with you.
So, yeah. Well, you know what, Fred? I know a school that people can support with their tax dollars. That's
your school, we know.
Go ahead. Do your plug for that, Jim.
Well,
do your plug for BACA. I want you to. Go ahead.
Well, actually, okay. So whoever educates the current children is deciding the next generation's policies. So if you don't like what's happening and you believe, like Fred does here, that it's our public school system that's causing the problem, then homeschool your children. Or if you would like to give your child a Christian education, I know a school that we're in the process of buying a big building that can educate upwards of 140 students right in downtown Bradford to be a beacon to the next generation and a beacon to this community. and you can support that school with your prayers. If you're retired and you want to volunteer some time, you got to go through some background checks. You can volunteer time there. We are going to be doing some maintenance projects. We got some huge things. If you're good with your hands, hey, those are services. Those are talents that the Lord gave you. Come down and share them. If you do not wish to give your money to the government because you do not like what the government's doing, then in Pennsylvania, you can redirect your Pennsylvania tax liabilities that you have to give to Harrisburg anyhow. You have to send it to them. But you can say Harrisburg, or I should say you have to pay those taxes, but you don't have to send it to Harrisburg. You can have those dollars go directly to a children's scholarship group, and then those funds are dispersed to families that as tuition assistance dollars so their kids can afford private education. For example, at the Christian Academy, our students received 93% tuition assistance last year. You were able to give your child a Christian education for a couple of dollars a day, literally a couple dollars a day. And the rest of it was covered because of generous Christians and businesses that I'm going to say stepped up to the plate and hit a home run. And we would like more players to step up to the plate and hit a home run and support it.
So how can they get a hold of you about that if they want to participate?
They can contact me, leave a message. You can call me at 814-558-9895, or you can contact the school, the Bradford Area Christian Academy, 25 Chambers Street, Bradford, Pennsylvania. Go to backacademy.com. That'll give you the information and give them a call. But they're probably going to refer you to me anyhow, because I try to handle this for them to help them out. So, if you don't like public education, homeschool your child, or hey, if you want a Christian education, as we say, you don't have to leave your faith at home.
Right.
Yeah. We want you to bring it. We want you to pray in school. And,
why I say that is because I know high schoolers that have graduated high school, they can't even spell cat.
Okay, well, guess what? We have a high school. Well, Fred, here's a solution. Your folks.
I agree with you 100%, Jim.
Well, no, I'm gonna emphasize a solution to what you just said. We now partner and next year will be our 4th year, so we're understanding this program very good at this point. With Liberty University, so you can get a Christian high school education, and if your child wishes to, they can dual enroll and graduate with an associate's degree by the time they graduate high school at the Christian Academy. So there are, once again, there are options. People have options. Plant a garden. Send your child to a Christian education. If you don't have a child, support Christian education. Buy gold, silver. Get involved in your local community, like Mums for Liberty. Get involved in things. There are plenty of solutions, and there's that old saying, all it takes for evil to thrive is for a few good people to do nothing.
Right.
So
get involved in the school board. Become a member.
Yeah, actually, you know what? We're expanding our school board. You want to get involved in a school board? Come join the Bradford Area Christian Academy School Board. We just brought a person on, a pastor from Mount Jewett area, and we're looking at bringing another pastor on from a different place. Not all pastors. We want folks that have very specific skills too. If you're an attorney, we would like to have an attorney. If you're somebody who knows insurance very well, if you know construction for building maintenance, we want to bring people on. We want to call everyone in to get involved. And here's your opportunity to do this. So there it is. Okay, that plug went a lot longer than I planned, James.
No, it's all right. It was a good
plug. If they're not in our area, can they still enroll in BACA?
What's that?
So say they're in Eldred or a different St. Jamestown, they can still enroll in BACA?
Yeah, Smithport was busing a bunch of students up to us.
I'm just curious. I'm just asking for knowledge, right? So the people who are listening know this.
We got a couple families coming in from Kane. That's 30 miles away.
That's fine.
Yeah,
because they want a Christian
from
education.
New York State. So now with them, there's a separate scholarship that helps them out. And so if folks want to donate to that scholarship, see me as well, because New York State residents do not qualify for the Pennsylvania EITC program. Right. However, keep this in your prayers. Do not make it political. Do not make it political. But underneath, as much as I think the one big beautiful bill is a disaster because it's raising the deficit $4 trillion and other reasons, very unconstitutional. and technically this would be unconstitutional too. So I have mixed feelings about it. Okay. But starting next year, if Josh Shapiro signs on to this part of the program, and he needs to sign it, so you can call Josh Shapiro, ask him to sign it. He probably will. He's a supporter of the EITC program in Pennsylvania already. But if he signs on to this part of the program, people anywhere in the country can redirect up to $1,700 per federal tax return to come to BACA for children scholarship assistance. So if you pay federal income tax, even if you are in Hawaii, you could send $1,700 to the Christian Academy to be used to help parents afford Christian education in this community. So
Very
pray
good.
about that.
Very good.
Do
Yeah.
not make it political. Do not make it political. Just say, I support this program. And I personally think a lot of our state representatives do. And here's the reason why. I can't confirm this. I can't prove it. It's a little bit of a gut instinct. The program is set up that you can make a decent amount of money and still qualify for the scholarships. I suspect there's a lot of representatives out there that do not want their children into public schools, and so they benefit from this.
Could be.
I can't prove that. I do think there's an aspect to it. So, but in any case, don't make it political. Just say, we want you folks to support this. Sign on to this option.
All right. This is a good way to end the show. Good way to end the show today. We're already 8 minutes.
We're not talking about labor. Okay.
Yeah, I know. We didn't cover two of our topics, so that's all right. We'll get it the next time.
So I wanted to leave your audience with hope and options and solutions, James.
Okay.
I think a lot of them will share today.
I appreciate that. And that's what we try to do too. I don't want to get hung up on the always looking at the bad side of things. I still think we have a chance as long as God gives us breath and the world's still spinning, we have a chance to turn this stuff around. So, I'm very, very hopeful, and I believe that will be the case. So with that said,
can I say one thing here?
What?
Hey, Fred, you keep mentioning get on a school board.
Right.
I know one you might be interested in.
You're talking about BACA.
Yeah.
Only reason I mention that is because our school boards are wrecked, and then our taxes automatically go to them. We don't get a choice like we can do for you. Our taxes automatically go.
I can't approve you.
So I think they should be run accurately.
Fred, I can't approve you because it has to go through a board decision, but I can nominate you. Let me know if you're interested in being nominated. There you go.
All right.
You got an option, Fred.
Fred, as long as you're being put on the spot there, why don't you pray us out of here today?
Yeah, I will, because I'm running out of time. So I just pray now, Lord, that all the people who are listening, Lord, I just pray that we would somehow break the spirit of division that's rampant in this country, because Satan is the king of division, and that's what he likes. Right now, there's so much common ground with the people here. If they were to just realize how much common ground we have, we could change the U.S. today. We got so many people that agree with so many things that they're in common with, but they stay in division over the stupid word called politics. And I ask, Lord, that you would break that division and give us wisdom and give us understanding. And I pray for all the listeners and all the viewers that you would open your mind to coming in unity for once. Stop being divided by little things. Even our churches are divided by music. I ask, Lord, that you would break that division over people in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
Hey, everybody, thank you very much for joining us today. We'll see you next week, same day, same time. And wherever you are today, whether it's sunny, it is looking pretty good here. We ask you to have a great day. Be blessed.